Hello and welcome to episode 25 of the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players of the gigging variety. I'm your host, David Holloway, and it's great as always to be here with you. I've got the brilliant Paul Bindig here with me again. How are you, Paul?
Oh, really well, thanks, David. Great to be here.
It's always good to have you here. And we've got another exciting guest this episode, which is Mr. Matt Johnson, who is probably best known as being sort of keyboard player with Jamiroquai, and also has co-written a number of the songs with Jamiroquai, and does a whole lot more outside of that. So it was really great to talk with him. And as you'll hear, he has lots of cool stories about playing with Jamiroquai and his own solo career, but also he has some, I'd argue, very insightful tips on just, being a player and playing within a band that I know I valued. So yeah, have a listen, and we'll talk after the show. Matt, thanks so much for joining us on this beautiful, Monday morning in the UK.
Absolute pleasure. Great to speak to you.
So I thought we would do something slightly different. We usually ask guests over the last few months how they're keeping busy in these COVID times, but it's pretty damn obvious you have been keeping busy. I mean, just alone your YouTube channel, let alone anything else. So just tell us what you've actually been up to the last 3 months.
I finished off a solo record, which, is the first one I've got around to making. So lockdown was quite productive for me from that point of view. I'd just be getting up like super early in the morning and working on that, in between looking after kids and things. And I've put a lot more energy into my YouTube channel, which people seem to be really enjoying, so started doing a few tutorials on that. And I'm going to broaden it out, I'm just going to keep adding stuff, all keyboard related stuff, really, useful information that people can get for free.
Good stuff. And we're definitely going to ask you more about that a little later on. So, but let's start off with a bit of a potted history of Matt Johnson. So just give us a bit of a synopsis of your career, more how you started out, actually. So what got you into music initially and kicked off your career?
Right, yeah. Well, I was always musical as a kid. I was a trumpet player when I was young, and I was in like the National Children's Orchestra and stuff like that. And my dad wanted me to be a classical trumpet player. But then I'd always sort of mess around with the piano as well. And when I got into my teens, I don't know, I got bored of playing classical music, I guess, wanted to try and get some girls somehow. And so I got learning pop songs and stuff. And like I say, the piano was always there. And a mate of my brother's had a band. He was a drummer, and the keyboard player left, and he said, "Oh, why don't you try out for it?" And I'd actually never thought about joining a band before. I thought, oh yeah, what the hell, why not? Went to the audition, got it. And then straight from there, that was about age 16, I started getting work, because I grew up in Bournemouth. It was like a small town, and I was one of the obvious sort of, more naturally talented ones. So I started getting work straight away. So I really drifted into it. And then I moved up to London, age about 20, and I started off just busking on the streets, paying my bills sort of thing. And bit by bit, I started getting gigs in London. And I sort of became part of this. There was a really good sort of soul R&B scene in London at that time. And I became like the guy that backed all the singers. They all called me for the gigs because I knew all the tunes and I could play them in any key and stuff. So I started working like that, really. And eventually that led to an audition for Jamiroquai, which I got, and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah.
Just on the subject of the audition, I'm really curious, Matt, as to how that opportunity came about, but also how does one prepare for an audition for Jamiroquai? What did you have to do?
Well, firstly, how I got to the audition stage was someone had recommended me for another gig, a singer called Miss Dynamite. I don't know if you remember Miss Dynamite. She was like a 90s R&B singer, really good. Yeah, and anyway, I went to that audition. They already had a keyboard player, but they were thinking about getting a second one. But in the end, they didn't bother getting a second keyboard player because the other one was so good. But they liked me, and I was like their favorite player at the time. And in the band was Stuart Zender and Simon Katz, who were sort of, in the original Jamiroquai band, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they recommended me to Jamiroquai's drummer, Derek McKenzie, when Toby, the original keyboard player, left. They recommended me. So that's how I got the audition. And then they had like a couple of days worth of auditions. A load of people came, I think. And they'd just given about 4 or 5 songs to learn. So I learned those, and I learned a few other obvious ones as well, just to make sure. And I just made sure I learned them really well.
Yeah.
And then when I got to, I remember getting to the audition, like it was about 10 in the morning, trying to find my way to Jay's place, which is in the middle of nowhere. And the first thing, I got out of my rust bucket of a car, and like these 2 massive Alsatians were just jumping after me, like barking their heads off like they wanted to eat me. And I could see Jay looking really moody in a like an Adidas kind of, weather top or something. And that was my welcome. But I went in and I knew straight away that he loved my playing, because I just did the first thing, and suddenly he changed from being quite dour to jumping up and down and being really happy,
Yeah, cool. Was it just Jay that you auditioned for, or was the whole band
there?
there?
The whole band was there. Yeah. And I think the first song was something like Cosmic Girl. And it was actually a real buzz for me, because when we started playing it and then he started singing, it was like, oh, yeah, sounds like JK. It's a funny thing when someone's got such a distinctive voice, and I could hear how good he is, when he started singing. And anyway, and then he pointed to me to bust a solo, and I just let it rip, and he was into it.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's funny too. I guess a song like Cosmic Girl, it's so hooky and catchy and dancey, and it's such a cool song. And this probably didn't happen to you, but I could see it would be easy to just get caught up enjoying the moment of playing with the band, and not perhaps concentrating 100% on playing your parts exactly right.
Well, yeah, it could happen. And it's funny actually. The Rhodes part on that song, to my mind, has a slightly strange rhythm, even though it sounds really natural when you listen to it. To play it, it's on a slightly different beat where I would naturally play it. So I remember that being a bit of a weird one to get my head around, getting that rhythm right.
Yeah, cool. Well, obviously the rest is history. So I'm really curious, just sort of following on from that, in Jamiroquai, in my opinion, that the sound of the keys is so integral to the overall sound of the band.
Yeah,
and I'm thinking about, you coming and joining the band that was established and successful, and it's still been very successful since then. But did you have to adapt your own playing style and then maybe later songwriting style much to fit into the Jamiroquai sound, in inverted commas?
Yeah, not much, because I think maybe one of the reasons I got the gig was I naturally was into the same sort of things probably as Toby and Jay were. So I was already into those sort of sounds like they were using. I was using those kind of sounds too. So it felt pretty natural to fit in. But obviously there were certain things that were very specific, and I'd not done a big gig on that level before. And that does take a bit of adjustment, because when you've been sort of playing a lot of club gigs, you tend to play a lot more because you've got to fill out the sound in a small club. Whereas when you go to do a big arena, you have to adjust to the fact that it's a great big cavernous place, and you have this huge sound system, and actually you have to play quite a lot less. So that was a little bit of an adjustment. And in Jamiroquai, Jay really listens to the keyboards when he's performing live. He tunes to the keyboards, and that's really his cue. So as the keyboard player in that band, you've got to be really aware of him, and when he's struggling and needs help, or when he's struggling to find the key. If you're just playing all over the place, it's going to really just ruin his gig. So that became it took me a few gigs to realize that and get into that, and I've got better at it over the years, I guess.
Yeah, and that probably links nicely to as far as Jay taking cues from you. There's the two of you playing keys in the band. So how do you tend to divvy up the keys playing duties between yourself and Nate?
Well, I mean, the reason we got Nate in on the last tour was to sort of cover the strings, basically.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, I choose the parts I want to play. I play the main keyboard parts
Yeah.
basically, and then I'll give him the string parts, or there might be a pad that I can't cover, because it's better for me to concentrate. Obviously, I used to be able to I used to cover everything, but sometimes some of the string parts might lose out a bit because it would be hard to play every part of the string part and the Rhodes part. So it's been quite cool from that point of view that he can cover those bits that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to cover.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
on the songwriting process, I mean, Paul mentioned about adjusting a style, but what is the songwriting process within the band? Obviously, you've played a pivotal role in co-writing a number of songs, etc. So, yeah, how does that tend to work?
Well, normally he's got he might come in with a little idea on his phone or something like that. It could be just like a bum 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 ba-dum, bum, whatever little riff, and then you work it out, and then you try to find some chords. He might be hearing some sort of chords in his head, and then we try to pick them out. Then I might suggest something different, and it tends to evolve, and it often ends up like nothing like the original idea. But normally that's how it evolves. He'll have some sort of little starting point of an idea, and then we'll progress the music generally. It depends. There's some songs like there was one song on the last album I remember called "We Can Do It,"
Oh, yeah.
and I think he'd had that top line, just the chorus, "We can do it." That was it, and then we had like some sort of disco-y type thing, and it wasn't quite working out. And then we decided, okay, we got a beat, and then we'd forgotten about it, and then we got a beat for something else, and I just started playing a bass line, and he just started singing "We Can Do It," and that was it. The song was written in literally about a minute. It was just done. It was so sometimes they just come out like that so naturally. Those are the nicest moments, really, when it happens like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt. With the songwriting side of things, as David was just saying, you're very instrumental in writing songs for the band. Was that the case from day one, or was that something that you grew into in your time in the band, or how's that worked?
Yeah, I mean, luckily I've always been quite heavily involved in the writing because I think he's comfortable writing with keyboards. So even on the first album I did, Dynamite, I've got about 9 songs on there. It was very much me and Rob, that album, Rob the guitarist.
Yep.
But really, I suppose the last album is when I came most into my own, because I produced it as well, and that was really just me and Jay. Basically, we sat and we did everything. We worked for a month solidly, like 9 to 5, like 5 days a week. And we just caned it writing, and that in that month we'd written most of the tunes from the album, and it wasn't originally sort of that I was going to be the producer, but the demos came out so well in the first month. Then his manager at the time just said, "Oh well, why don't you let Matt produce?"
Yeah, nice.
So that was, I had much more chance to be involved on a deeper level, if you know what I mean, in the creation of the songs. Yeah.
So I'm interested in your perspective on just songwriting and production generally. Do you feel that it's changed much in recent years with the way technology's been moving?
Yeah, I think it has. I think obviously people still write in the same way as well. There's a lot of different ways of writing now, and I mean, you see some tracks they've got like 10 writers on them, and you have to wonder, is that really writing? You know what I mean? Because if a guitarist just plays a couple of chords, it's like, okay, I co-wrote that song. Well, did you? You just kind of come up with a couple of chords.
Right.
Yeah.
So to me, real writing is where you get into the big picture of a song, the sentiment of the song, what it's about, rather than just, here's a good beat, you can chuck something on the top of that. So to me, that's where the crux of writing is, and obviously that's often very much led by the singer. But I try as a keyboard player to, I will suggest changes in melodies if I think, that it's not great or that lyric sucks a bit, you know what I mean? Without trying to tell someone what to do. which I couldn't do that to Jay anyway. He wouldn't listen to me, but he does listen. He does listen when he can sense that, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe that isn't great. Then he'll change it up. So I like to get involved with artists like that. For me, writing is about helping the artist be the best they can be, if you know what I mean. Helping them bring out the best in themselves. I think that's a co-writer's role, rather than inflicting your personality too much on them. Do you know what I mean? You want to let them bring out their thing. You add your thing to it, but you let them be themselves. You know, and I think Jay's good like that as well, in that he will allow people to express themselves musically as well. And the best band leaders are like that. You know, like your James Browns and people. They let people do their thing to a degree, but they controlled it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess the end product is better that way, because everyone's contributing in a constructive way to the overall goal.
Exactly, you get the best out of someone. You know, if you're working with someone skillful, then you should try to use their skills and knowledge, you know, best you can.
Agreed. And I mean, you mentioned, Matt, your own work. So you released a new album in July. And it's got that, you know, great dancey, funky, jazzy kind of vibe. What was your experience in making that album, and how that differed from your previous work?
I mean, it's a really enjoyable experience. It started out just because I did a gig with a mate of mine who's a bass player called Ernie McCone. He's got a studio. He's a great bass player, and I said to him, instead of paying me for the gig, let me use your studio for a couple of days, because he's got a nice little studio. And I went in with Jamiroquai's drummer, and we just cut some backing tracks from some tunes that I had, sort of thing. And then lockdown happened, so really most of it was done remotely after that. I would, like I said earlier, I'd get up like really early, like 6 a.m, and just do an hour and a half at that time. And I found that really productive, and I came up with lots of ideas, and then I'd farm them out. You know, I got a great American bass player called Mono Neon to play on a couple of tracks. You know, I just sent him the tracks, he sent them back. So a lot of it was done like that, without that one-on-one interaction. Although my wife sang on a lot of the tracks, so that was cool. She was really instrumental in the whole thing too. It was a great experience, and I just really felt like I wanted to make it as good as I could, even though I had very little budget. I wanted people to be able to compare it favorably to the work I've done with Jamiroquai.
Yeah.
You know, so that was really important to me, that it was kind of up there standards wise.
And it definitely stands up at that level. And just because you're a bit of a tech head, Matt, so when you say, you know, you worked remotely, we don't usually ask guests this, but how were you swapping the files? So what platform were you using? How were you actually approaching that whole get the album done remotely?
Generally, it was very basic. You know, I would just send, like, for instance, with the horns, I just send the stems of the music, the track, and then the horns separately, because what I'd do is I'd put the idea down, what I wanted, and get to replace it, you know, and they'd send me back tracks, and everyone sent good quality stuff back, really. It worked really well. I mean, it was crazy with like Mono Neon, the bass player, because I sent him one of the tracks with the music, the title track of the album, and I said, "Oh, look, if you like it, you know, you can do something on it. So let me know if you like it," sort of thing. And he just played on the MP3, which I'd already it already had my keyboard bass on it. So he just played over that, which I thought was incredible. And it actually sounded amazing. It was like, geez, how the hell did you manage to do that?
That's cool. Yeah. No, and we're definitely going to quiz you on some more gear stuff in a little while too. But I mean, just keeping on the music for a sec too, one of the standout features of your work is that beautiful fusion of sort of the classic Rhodes sounds and equivalent ones with a lot of cutting edge sounds and approaches. What do you credit as being your main influence there? Like, what led you to develop that approach? Just a natural affinity with it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've got very eclectic tastes, but I love that sort of 70s. I mean, I grew up listening to a lot of Steely Dan, things like that. You know, Lonnie Liston Smith. I love that dreamy Rhodes sound with a phaser on it. I don't know, just it's something that I gravitate towards. And the Fender Rhodes, it's funny, it's like an instrument in itself. You know, you approach it slightly differently to how you play a piano, I think. I play differently when I play a Rhodes to when I play a piano. So I think I've got a real affinity for that instrument. And then with the synths, I don't know, like I say, I'm coming from so many different places musically. So I liked some of the sort of art rock music, how would you say, like Kraftwerk and Talking Heads and, Japan, all these sort of quite interesting things. I love those. But I've also got a big love of black music and soul, So I suppose it's just my musical personality is like a combination of those things, really.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Matt, you're quite eclectic in your taste. So I'm wondering, is there anything that you really listen to for pleasure that might surprise fans of your contemporary work? You work with Jamiroquai and your solo stuff?
Yeah, probably lots, really. Because like I said, I mean, I was trying to choose those top 5 records, and they're all across the board. Because I do. I love some rock music. I love jazz. I love Brazilian music. I love Fela Kuti, Nigerian music. I'm really across the board. So I'm not just listening to funk all the time. Much as I love it, I'd get bored listening to that all the time.
Yeah.
I want to hear different things. Different influences. Vangelis, Blade Runner soundtrack. I'm always playing that. Things like that.
We talked before briefly about your YouTubing and would love to explore that a little bit with you. You mentioned before you're putting a bit more time and energy into it, and I can certainly recommend to our listeners to do check out Matt's YouTube channel. It's really entertaining, informative, and fun. You've built your channel up to about 24,000 subscribers. How did the journey start, and where do you think you're going to take your channel to in the future?
It started sort of. My wife was pushing me to do it. She said, "Oh, you should try it," and so I thought, "Yeah, what the hell? I'll do it." And I think it suddenly got popular because I bought the Moog One. When it had just come out, and I thought, oh well, this is a good thing to do a video on, and sure enough, that was super popular. So straight away, I got quite a lot of followers, and then I thought, well, I suppose I'm like everyone else. I'm on YouTube looking at keyboard stuff, all the time. So I suppose you get driven to say, well, what are the things that frustrate me when I watch the videos? What do I want to see? And what I realized was there weren't that many people who could play quite well, who also had an understanding of synths and stuff. And often when you go to check out a synth in particular, it's just some guy, like pressing one button and showing you what the sawtooth wave is like or something, and it's cool, but it's not so interesting musically, because if you buy a synth or a keyboard, you want to know what it's going to be like in a real world situation.
That's right.
So that's what I've tried to do with my channel, is that I try to show the keyboard. That's why normally I've got 2 keyboards, and I try to play little sort of vinaigrettes of songs, or pieces of music, so you can hear the thing, what it actually might sound like if you used it in a track, rather than something that just goes zoing, and it's like, oh well, that's
closing filters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's only so much of that you can take, isn't there?
And on that, I mean, any chance you can get a hold of a polybrute, Matt? Because I've had the exact same issue with that. I've seen so many polybrute videos and not one where I've seen it played in a real world scenario. It's driving me mad.
Yeah, a lot of people have mentioned the polybrute. Yeah, I mean, look, if anyone out there's listening, do you want to send me one?
Yeah,
and
come
I'll
on,
try.
Manchuria. Send Matt a polybrute, please.
We'll start a petition.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It looks like a great synth. I'm sure it's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, you've got some amazing videos on there, and one that I was quite bemused was the Andromeda, and was reading through the comments, and obviously sponsor of this podcast, but also friend and forum mate is Dave Bryce, who posted a comment there as one of the guys that sort of helped create the Andromeda.
Yeah. Yeah, that was cool. Yeah.
Small world. So yeah, great guy. So is that something you still use relatively regularly?
Yeah, I mean, I do. It's like I always say, the reason you end up with lots of keyboards is they're all good for different things. So like I'll pull out that Andromeda if I'm struggling to find a good pad sound, for instance, because it's got amazing thick pads, so I'll use it for things like that. There's a couple of lead sounds on it as well that I've programmed that I know are great. So it just depends on what music I'm working on. If I think, oh yeah, the Andromeda's the one for that, then out it comes, sort of thing. And I do think all these keyboards are good for a few sounds, really. They all do a few things really exceptionally well. So yeah, it does get used.
Yeah. I was going to ask related to that. So you said, use different things for different purposes. Your touring rig, there's a great video there of generally how that's set up. So I'm more interested in what are the synths at home that you just either go to constantly or new ones you're keeping your eye on and sort of have a little bit of drill going over at the moment.
Well, I mean, I'm quite satiated at the moment. I've bought a few. I just bought the Prophet 10.
Okay.
Which is nice. Yeah, so I've been playing around. So there's a video coming for that soon. That's lovely. The Moog One, I'm still very, very in love with. It's just so capable of such a broad amount of sounds. It takes a lot of learning, but I'm still learning it, but I'm getting better and better sounds out of it all the time I'm using it. So I use that a lot. And I've also, not long ago, bought this UDO Super 6.
Ah, yes.
I don't know if you've seen that. I love that. It's amazing. It really is incredible sounding thing. So at the moment, those are my toys, that I'm using a lot. I've got a Jupiter 8 there as well. And that often gets used too, because it's just there's certain things that it can do as very majestically that other synths can't quite get to. I used that a lot on the last Jamiroquai album, the Jupiter 8, because Jay loves the sound of it as well. So we did use that an awful lot.
Is there anything on the horizon that you're lusting after, Matt?
Well, like I say, I think I've bought enough keyboards for a while.
Is that possible though?
There's nothing out there now. Now I've got that Prophet. I mean, that's something that it's a nostalgia thing, really, because all the things that we all grew up listening to, it's great. You sit in front of it and you find yourself playing tunes from the 80s, because it's just got the sound. So yeah, I feel like I've really got most things covered at the moment. And I've not. I mean, there's loads of interesting things out there. There's that Hydra synth that a lot of people seem to like. But yeah, I feel like I've got enough at the moment. I'd have to sell a few to make a bit more room in my studio. I am actually working on a plugin at the moment as well, but it's very early day. Yeah, I won't say too much about it, but I'm going to bring out a plugin next year, probably, with this company from LA. So that should be cool. With also a bit of sort of MIDI interactive playing. I'll do some playing and some MIDI files, and people will be able to use them in their sessions.
And
that's exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting. Yeah. So yeah, can't wait to hear about it. And what sort of, as far as your computer-based system, what are your, what's your platform of choice, if you're happy to disclose that, and some go-to plugins that you love to bits?
Yeah, I use Pro Tools.
Oh, yep.
I've got a HDX system. I don't use any keyboard plugins apart from I've got Contact, which I do use because I've got like there's a lovely piano sample called Piano in Blue, which is the piano that Bill Evans played on Kind of Blue.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, right. It's actually sampled in the room that album was made on the piano that he played.
Wow.
And it's a really beautiful piano sample. So I use that quite a lot. Apart from that, I use all hardware. I made a decision a few years ago. I think I sort of had a bit of an epiphany one day. I was just like sitting there and I was messing around with like a Jupiter 8 plugin on some track I was working on. And then I just looked around and I was like, what what am I doing? I've got a Jupiter 8. So why am I using a plugin? And I find that, we get lazy and we just can't be bothered to plug in the hardware thing. We end up using a plugin. So at that moment, I just decided to stop using them completely and to make all hardware. And I've not, never regretted doing that.
No.
But in terms of like production plugins, I love the UAD gear. Yeah, I've got loads of the UAD plugins, and that's mostly what I use, to be honest, because they're fantastic.
And the lack of plugins, or not lack, but not using plugins, I assume that translates to being on stage. So do you use anything on stage to coordinate between all your rig as far as switching patches or anything like that?
No, I do it all manually.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's not so difficult these days. Like, especially, I've got that Yamaha montage.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool because you can select about 8 scenes within a patch.
That's right.
So I can seamlessly go from one sound to another with the scenes, without having to change a patch. So that makes it real easy. And then some of them are MIDI'd up together. So if I change, I've got like a montage 6, and that's MIDI'd up to the OB6, Dave Smith OB6. So sometimes, I might be using a combination of sounds, or I've got the keyboard split. So the bottom is playing OB6 and the top is the montage, things like that. So yeah, I find it not so complicated. And, I don't have to worry about it ever going wrong in that sense as well. I'm in control of my own destiny on stage. So I'm really happy keeping it like that. Yeah. You don't have problems. And if something goes wrong, with a keyboard or something, you just go over to one of the other ones, and where all your sounds are, because you set them up and you know what each number and patch is yourself. I think it's a good way, personally.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And that being said, having played lots of gigs all over the world, various sizes, I'm curious as to, and we always ask this question of every guest, Matt, what is your most memorable on-stage train wreck?
Okay, yeah, I have one. It's not technical; it's user error.
That's okay.
Deeper Underground, the track Deeper Underground.
Oh, yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a big moment in the Jamiroquai set. For a long time it was. Anyway, it'd be like one of the last songs, and it started with this massive orchestral intro. Mm. It's like a very filmic thing, and I've got a patch set up with it's like strings plus horns plus a timpani. It's like this big noise basically, and it plays quite a bleak line that's kind of a bit weird in a way, very filmic thing. And the sound engineer puts like a sub on the sound, and he cranks it up so people in the front row look like they're just about to spontaneously combust. It's so loud. And anyway, it's all on me. So I'm hitting this thing. And one day, it was a massive crowd. I can't remember where it was, but it was a festival or something, 40,000 people or whatever. I'm playing it and I'm going up the line, and my mind just went a complete blank. Just complete blank. And I just didn't know what the next notes were, but I had to keep playing, obviously. So I hit some notes, and sure enough, they were the wrong notes. And it was just like, to be that loud and it to be that wrong. Oh, man, I really wanted the floor to just open up and swallow me. And from that day on, that's about, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. Every time we're on stage and we play that song and I do that intro, I'm sweating. I'm just sweating. Oh, and as soon as that intro's finished, I'm like, oh, thank Christ for that. Okay, I'm looking forward to my beer and backstage now.
That makes me feel better, Matt, because I have the same. If I've made a mistake, it never goes away as far as the stress around that particular phrase. Never goes away.
It's the shock of doing it, isn't it? The shock of doing it, it does stay a long time. But I've learned generally with mistakes on gigs, because let's face it, everyone makes mistakes. I think sometimes you can make a mistake, like earlier in my career, if I made a mistake, it would really play on my mind during the gig, and it would really affect the rest of my gig, if you know what I mean. Yeah. I might lose confidence. But now I really don't do that. Now if I make a little mistake, I try to reset and totally forget about it. You know what I mean? I think it's quite important. It's amazing how much the mental game of music, plays such a big part. I think, I think there's great players, like amazing players, that might not go as far as they can because maybe mentally they're not quite got the right sort of mindset, if you know what I mean.
That's right.
It's a funny thing.
I think that's a great piece of advice for any musician is to keep your head in the game even if you have made a mistake. Thanks for sharing that, and I'm curious whether you can share just some other general things you've learned over your long career and very successful, and you've worked with other artists. Are there things that you've learned such as that have improved you over the journey, and what do you think you may have passed on to others as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots, especially about live playing. I mean, to do on that same sort of subject, like when we all have good days and bad days, don't we? Where our energy is high, maybe our keyboard skills are high too, and we have a great gig. And those are fantastic moments. But when you're not having a good day, my advice is always go to your basic default. I'm not saying that you just sort of your head goes down or anything like that. Not at all. You concentrate as much as you can, but you go to basics, play your basic stuff. Don't try anything that's slightly challenging on those days. And I found if you do that, then by the end of the gig, you'll have regained confidence and you'll be able to start playing well. Whereas if you try to oh, come on, I've got to do this, and push too far on a bad day, that can affect your confidence negatively. I feel as well, like playing live, how important it is to listen, and use your ears when you're in a band to what everyone else is doing and think about your role in the band, because I think a lot of something a lot of musicians suffer from is playing way too much. So I think that's a really important thing to do. When you're on stage, try to think like you're playing on a record, and how much would be acceptable for you to play. You know what I mean? If you were playing on a record, Quincy Jones was in the other room. You're not going to start waffling all over the singer, because you're going to get the red card straight away. I think those are the really important things that people don't maybe spend enough time thinking about. Not just keyboard players, all musicians, they spend so much time trying to get loads of good red hot licks or whatever, but not enough time thinking about their role within music, because actually each instrument usually does something quite basic, that your role is normally quite basic. There might be a little point where you can shine, but the musicians that impress me the most when I play with someone are the people that just do what's absolutely right for the song, and don't try to show off. If they show off, it's because it was a moment that required that. I think that's a really important thing to learn in terms of playing live and your progression as a musician. It's a sign of maturity and it's a sign of security as opposed to insecurity when you're trying to impress everyone, show you how great you are all the time, sort of thing.
Yeah, of course. I liked that story you were telling us earlier, Matt, too, about how part of your role is to help Jay be the best he can be, and really, it's you're part of a team.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really important. I think the keyboard player is often really pivotal for singers. I think in a lot of bands or musical situations, function gigs, whatever, the singer kind of does rely on the keyboard because the keyboard provides the most harmonic information. Do you know what I mean? It's easy. Sometimes singers can get lost on stage. They can't hear what the pitch is, what the key is. And it's normally the keyboard they'll look to try to get that information. So whatever gig I'm doing, I'm always looking at the singer and trying to help the singer the best I can, because that's going to make the gig go the best it can. Because most people are, they're focused on the singer and the song. So our job in that situation, unless we're doing a jazz gig or something or an instrumental gig, our job is to try and help that singer get the gig going, get things going along and entertain the crowd.
I'm wondering why we don't have a keyboard player's 10 commandments, because I think the one you mentioned, Matt, there about the Quincy Jones, like commandment 1 should be the Quincy Jones rule, and commandment 2 should probably be for on stage the James Brown rule, which is exactly the same as the Quincy Jones rule, but just on stage.
Yeah.
I think
Head
that's great.
always aware, you know what I mean? Always
Yeah.
looking around, seeing what's going on.
Because you don't want James Brown looking at you saying you've done wrong.
Exactly.
Or
well,
Chuck
it's the same
Berry.
in Jamiroquai. You can't make it. You won't last in a Jamiroquai gig if you're not paying attention to Jay, because he does do some real random last minute changes on stage. So we're all really used to having our heads up, and but I do notice some good players do that they're not looking. They're just so in their playing, they're not kind of focusing on what's going on at the front of the stage.
Exactly. Yeah.
At your peril.
And so given the year you've had already, Matt, what's on the horizon in the coming 12 months or so? Obviously subject to touring, and there's a lot of things up in the air at the moment, but what's the plan for the coming year?
Well, mate, I'm still formulating it. It's very hard to say, isn't it? I can't see live gigs coming back anytime soon.
No.
Not on a big level. I just can't see it. So hopefully, I think Jay does want to start doing something new. So I'm hoping my next year or so will be maybe making a Jamiroquai album.
Yeah.
Would be fantastic. That'd be the best way I could spend the next 12 months. I'll definitely keep doing the YouTube stuff. I'm doing sessions for people as well. There's people are coming through, and I'm doing writing with some artists.
Good.
So while I'm at home, I'll be spending my time like that, I guess, trying to write with people, just trying to do stuff. I never sit every day. I'm trying to do something in the studio, no matter what. And I think, for all of us in these times, especially musicians, obviously it's really tough. I'm one of the lucky ones that I've got, royalties and things like that to buffer me. Some people don't have that luxury. But I think we've all just got to keep our heads up and try and think how we can use our time the best we can,
That's right.
Even if that's, well, now I can spend 5 hours a day practicing all those things that I never learned, whatever. Got to be positive, haven't we?
No, well put. And we've said this to previous guests, but we are all sort of on a virtual desert island at the moment. So it's time for that dreaded question, the desert island discs. So what did you come up with, Matt? What are your 5?
Okay. They're not much to do with keyboards, I'll have to admit.
That's okay.
Well, I just thought I got to pick 5 records because, like I said to you, I'm so eclectic with taste. So I thought if I'm going to have 5 records, it's got to reflect kind of all across the board what I like listening to. So, first of all, I wanted to have something that reflected live music, and energetic music.
Oh,
yeah. So, Rufus, Stomping at the Savoy.
Okay.
I don't know if you know that record. Rufus is just one of the best live albums ever made, and Chaka Khan is just absolutely on fire, and the whole band are amazing, and it's just real good, energetic music that makes you happy, So that's that. On a very introspective note, when you're in the other mood, David Sylvian, Secrets of the Beehive.
Oh, wow, yeah, cool.
It's just a beautiful, beautiful album. Amazing musicians on it, but very simple and just great songs. Really great songs and very, very moody.
And you probably know the answer to this, Matt. David Sylvian and obviously Japan previously, did they have a lot of success outside of the UK? Would they sort of have US success? I can't recall.
I think limited. Yeah. I think they had a little bit, but it was more a UK thing, I guess.
Yeah.
I love Japan. Japan was one of the bands that really influenced me the most when I grew up. It was like one of the first bands that I ever got into, and to this day, I think the keyboard sounds on like Tin Drum, particularly the last Japan album, are just other work. They're just so amazing. They really are so amazing. They still sound like, wow, how the hell did you get that sound now? And he's one. I like that keyboard player, Richard Barbaro, because he's self-confessed he's not a great keyboard player in terms of technique or anything like that, but his approach to synthesizers and stuff is just amazing. And as a sound designer, I've got massive respect for him, you know, as a keyboard player,
Nice.
and Sylvian, you know, as well. I love him.
Well,
So that one. What else have we got? Yes, I had to have a hip hop album on there. So Outkast, The Love Below.
nice.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great record. He's just such a quirky character, Andre 3000, and you know, it's a good fun album.
Yeah.
It's a good fun album. But I love that Love Below's kind of got all that in there a little bit, plus a bit of rap and hip hop. I'm a bit of a hip hop fan. So that's that one. David Bowie, Heroes.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big David Bowie fan. Again, it's another thing. When I was growing up, I really was a big Bowie fan, and I love the B-side with the instrumentals, Brian Eno sort of instrumentals on Heroes. Again, some great keys on that actually, and just really interesting sound textures that I love. And last one is Pat Metheny, Still Life Talking.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a beautiful album. You know, I had to have something with a bit of a jazz influence in there. I love Lyle Mays as a keyboard player. Sadly died, didn't he, earlier this year?
Recently, yes, that's right.
Yeah, I love his keyboard playing. He's fantastic. For me, he was like the next step on from Bill Evans. He's got that sort of laid back, beautiful piano style, you know, and some great synth sounds. And the other thing I love about that album, which is why it's in my top 5, is it's got a Brazilian influence, and I really love Brazilian music. So there you go. That's my top 5.
And I like how you, one of my favourite songs of the whole 80s is Pat Metheny and Bowie's This Is Not America. I just love that song to bits. I love it.
Yeah, that's
I wish
great.
they'd done more work together.
Really odd pairing, isn't it?
It
But
is.
it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Matt. That's brilliant, and it's been wonderful talking to you overall. I mean, yeah, you've provided some really brilliant insights on both, you know, playing and lessons you've learnt from that, and production. And we'll certainly be linking to your YouTube channel, and I'm already a subscriber, and look forward to seeing lots more of you in the future.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it.
And there we have it. Paul, I know I said in the intro that Matt had some insightful stuff. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too. I really liked his learnings, I guess you could say, from his time playing live. And I think there's some things any one of us who might play keyboards live, no matter what the scale of the show, could take away.
And I think it's that, I think Matt's the second or third guest we've had that's talked about that whole not thinking too much about what you're playing or overthinking and versus your muscle memory. And the more you think about it, the more likely you may be to make a mistake. And that sure as hell is my reality as a keyboard player. So yeah, it's always lovely to hear the pros say the same thing.
It's good to know they're human like us.
They are. And yeah, so huge thank you to Matt, who's a very good human all round from what I can tell. So we'll be back in a month or so. For those of you that listen regularly may realise the format has sort of drifted out to 3 or 4 weeks. That's not for lack of interest. That's purely Paul and I being hugely busy and successful, you know, men of society. Is that right, Paul? Something like that.
That must be the reason. That must be the reason.
So yes, we will be back, and we've got another a bit of a bucket list guest on next episode as well that we're a bit excited about. So we'll just tease that. As always, our website is www.keyboardchronicles.com. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/Keyboard Chronicles and on Twitter at thekeyboardchr1. We've still got our good old-fashioned email at editor@keyboardchronicles.com. And if you would like to become an official supporter, we do have a Patreon account, which is at patreon.com/Keyboard Chronicles. And that's pretty much all of our social links. A huge thank you to you, Paul, for joining me again this episode. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks again for inviting me along. I had a great time.
Yeah, and I think we need to get over this inviting you along stuff, because we're now at episode 25, and I think you've been here for like 22 of them. So I think, you know, you're part of the furniture, mate, and you can't escape.
Only because you can't get rid of me.
And most importantly, thanks to all of you out there for listening. We do appreciate the feedback we get. Actually, sorry, just as a side, we did get a nice email from someone that is suggesting 3 other keyboard players to approach, and so thank you for that. I think it was Ken. Apologies, Ken, if I've got your name wrong. So yeah, we really do appreciate that feedback, and we'll see you all here next episode.